Good afternoon. I would like to call this September 17th Town Council meeting to order. If you will join me in standing and saying the pledges of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you will continue standing for the invocation and Reverend General Hay from First African American Baptist Church.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, and other members in their respective places. To God be the glory for what all he has done, what all he will do, and what he will continue to do by blessing us and this council. Gracious God, our Father, we come right now to say thank you. Thanking your God for unmerited favor. We ask right now, God, that you continue to bless our families and friends, guide them with your powerful hands. Pour out your grace upon all those who have authority and power in our nation. And I pray for the President of the United States and all other leaders of the nation who have been given authority to govern. Grant that our present mayor, along with this town council, will be open to your leading. Grant that they will seek ways to administer justly among the gully communities of Hilton Head as well as all other communities. Precious Savior, keep them from the arrogance of power and blindness of nationalism. Help us, O God, to know our roles as citizens of this community and as citizens of this nation. Continue to mount this council up with wings as of eagles so that when they run, they don't get weary. When they walk, they will not faint, but allow them to walk in your love, walk in your joy, and continue to walk in your wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. These and other blessings we ask in thy Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Yes, sir. Mr. Orlando, do we have any changes today to the agenda?
No, sir.
All right. We have a motion to adopt the agenda as is.
Move to adopt the agenda as submitted. Second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. So moved, 7-0. Next, we'll move on to the minutes from June 17th, 20th, 28th, August 20th, and 29th. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the entire group at this time.
Is there a second?
Is that with the revisions?
Yes, it is. That's the way they were submitted. Yes. All those in favor, any discussion first of all? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. So moved, 7-0. Report of the town manager, Mr. Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, members of the public. A few things today. First and foremost, I would like to introduce Heather Woolwine. Where did Heather go? Hi, Heather. Heather is our Director of Communications. Started a few days ago, it seems like a few months ago, but definitely has hit the ground running. Heather brings more than 20 years of experience in public relations and communications, spending a large part of her career at the Medical University of South Carolina in those roles, and has a great background, a solid background in internal and external engagement, as well as executive communication. So Heather's a part of our senior leadership team. You will see her a lot and often, and I know that you're well equipped to lead our communications efforts strategically and effectively. So thank you and welcome. Just a quick follow-up, on September 5th, we had a neighborhood meeting in the Jonesville neighborhood. And then on September 12th, we hosted a similar meeting in the Muddy Creek neighborhood. Both events were very, very well attended. Thank you to Mayor and Council for showing up, the community members and neighbors for showing up, and definitely thank you to the staff at all levels and all positions that worked together to put this event together. We shared information. We shared information about our codes, our stormwater program, our addressing. Fire rescue was out there, well represented, and with a great leader on the grill. There's Chief. cook a mean burger, chief. But we collected a lot of feedback. So we weren't just out there to meet and greet. We were out there to listen, learn, and share what we know so far. We'll soon be back in front of town council to share some reports on lessons learned and next steps. A couple of which will be some neighborhood cleanups, a couple of which will be some infrastructure plans on some basic needs that are out there immediately, stormwater, sidewalk, lighting, some of those types of improvements. So we will bring those back soon. And then last but not least, we had a great workshop yesterday. We talked all things land management ordinance priorities. We have another workshop September 24th. That workshop's to talk a lot more about those district, those neighborhood level plans, those district plans, as well as the land management ordinance amendment, the overhaul. October 8th, another workshop on major thoroughfares. We will focus, we'll slow down a little bit and talk Pope Avenue, Palmetto Bay Road, Sea Pine Circle, and a section in William Hilton Parkway through the Chaplin Historic Neighborhood. On October 22nd, we'll be back again for another workshop to talk and hear from each other on the stormwater utility program, how we rate the projects, how those projects become maintenance projects or capital projects. We'll give you a good update and hear your feedback and questions on beach renourishment, the status of our resilience plan, which is a town council strategic plan initiative and one of your top priorities. And as well, it's been a bit since you all approved the solid waste recycling report that we gave, and we just like to, at that workshop, if we can find some time, let you know what TJ and the team have been up to in that regard. So that's my report for tonight.
All right. Thank you. Report from members of town council. Do we have any general reports? Ms. Bryson.
Here, just quickly following up on the town manager's comments about the community meetings. I think they're a wonderful way to communicate with the community. And I encourage us to continue to do those, to do more of them this fall and the coming year. And I know that we're planning community engagements with the rewrite of the land management ordinance. So I encourage us to keep doing that. And thank you to the town manager and his staff, and thank you to the community folks who showed up. I echo that.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today is National Register to Vote Day. I felt compelled to say that here today. But more importantly, I'm encouraging each and every one of us to reach out to a young person and make sure that they are registered to vote. Statistics tell us here on Hilton here that that's where the gap is. So just encourage our young folks to participate in this process. After all, they are the future of Hilton here. Thank you.
All right. Any other general reports? I've got a couple. One exciting one. Well, both are exciting, actually. Luana Graves Sellers has been nominated for Best Documentary at Cannes Film Festival. She's won several awards for this, and it is Colored Troops of the Civil War, Courage, Determination, Survival. But it's really a special thing where a local individual has received this type of recognition. So just want to make a note of that because that's a very special thing. Can't go on without saying that, hey, this week is Hilton Head Island Jams 2024. So it begins Thursday night, runs through Sunday. So we've got eight different locations, about 36, 37 different bands. If you haven't downloaded the mobile app, download the mobile app and you can see who's playing where, what time, what location. So take a look at that. That's all I've got for now. And reports of Low Country Area Transportation Study, Mr. Stanford.
No meeting, no report, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Becker, Low Country Council of Governments.
No report.
Mr. Ames, Beaufort County Airports Board.
No report, but this Thursday in the council chambers at 1:30 will be the airport board meeting.
I will take the Soloco. We had a meeting on the 27th and we discussed setting up committees to address child care action committee within the Low Country. And the municipalities each are going to have representatives on there to address that, working with the county council and the state to see how we can bring in and what we can do to attract additional child care. And then there's going to be another group set up to discuss litter and recycling. Another committee, and that's going to be made up of some town members from those municipalities to make certain that we're addressing those two items in a way that has positive effects. Litter has become a big issue. How do we address it? How do we address it regionally? Recycling, what is going on from the county standpoint? What is going on from the state standpoint? So there's going to be more information that's coming out on that. There will actually be a meeting next Tuesday, first report of those committees. And let's see, we will go on to Island Recreation Association. Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. The Island Recreation Board of Directors will host a community forum on parks and recreation for candidates running for town council on Wednesday, October 2nd at 6 p.m. at the Island Rec Center. Candidates will address questions provided by the board on the current and future needs of Parks and Rec.
All right, thank you. Ms. Becker, Community Services and Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. The Community Service Public Safety Committee met yesterday, September 16th. We had a presentation given by our Fire Chief, Chris Blankenship, mid-year report, as acknowledging to them what a great job they're doing. If you get an opportunity to read the report, I believe it's on our website, please go in and see all the fabulous things that the fire and rescue is doing here in the community, not only just saving lives, but also reaching out into the community and into the schools to help with building safe youth looking forward to the future and hopefully a career in fire and rescue and EMS. The second discussion item that we had was about the integrated pest management policy that we've been working on. The decision was made to move the draft policy forward to town council with the understanding that staff will review additional revisions requested by members of the public and report on these very revisions when the discussion with the town council occurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ames, Public Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Planning Committee met on September 12th and received a presentation regarding a resolution to adopt the 2024 repetitive loss area analysis as required by the Federal Emergency Management Agency's community rating system. The committee moved unanimously to advance consideration of the resolution to the full council.
Thank you. And Mr. Brown, Finance and Administrative Committee.
Yes, sir. The Finance and Administrative Committee met on August 27th. The committee received a report and discussed the preliminary 2024 year-end financial highlights. Of those, all is well. Initial findings indicate a positive net consolidated financial increase for both fund balances and other financing sources compared to the last 2 years.
All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to new business, and we will have Mr. Gruber up with the first reading of an ordinance amending Title 12, Chapter 3 of the Municipal Code entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic Control, Parking to revise regulation related to paid parking, originally considered by Town Council on September 18th, 2023. But the decision was made to withhold further consideration until other relevant criteria could be considered. The Community Services and Public Safety Committee, as well as member of Town Council, have requested revisions. Mr. Gruber.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Good evening. So before you tonight on your agenda, you have 2 items for discussion and possible action. As part of my presentation today, I'm going to cover both of those items because of the interconnected nature of them. But once we're done covering that, you're ultimately going to be voting separately. First, on an ordinance creating the framework for a parking management program. And second, on a resolution that's going to set forth various policy considerations such as rates, hours of operation, days of collection, things of that nature. And so, again, in this presentation, I'm going to be covering both just because of how interconnected they are, but want to make sure it's clear that you're going to be voting on each of those separately when it comes to the appropriate time. So let me cover what I'm going to overview today as part of this presentation. I'm going to start off by defining the purpose of this program and making sure that people understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish through these discussions and ultimately through putting in place a program for paid parking. I'm going to review the elements of the beach parking ordinance that's before you today, the elements that are within that document, answer any questions you may have about them. We'll also review the elements of the resolution. One of the reasons why there's 2 separate documents are we want to set forth the framework in the town code, but the matters of policy we want to keep nimble and flexible, and therefore if we adopt those by resolution, it makes it easier for this body to come back and make amendments in the future should it be necessary to do so. I'm next going to review the comparative parking rate data. This is information that was provided to the Community Services and Public Safety Committee and ultimately was part of the foundation for the recommendations that are coming to you this evening. But we want to make sure that all members of council have access to this data, and that way you're all working with the same information. We're also going to examine and review revenue and expense projections. I have to thank Adriana Burnett, our finance director. She was very helpful in pulling together this. This allows us to look at several different options that are under consideration and be able to have a general understanding with knowledge that there's a lot of assumptions underlying this, but with those assumptions in mind, we can have a good understanding of what we might be looking at financially from a revenue and expense projection. We're then going to summarize the policy recommendations that are coming to you from the Community Services and Public Safety Committee. And then lastly, I'm going to outline all of those various policy matters that are before you ultimately for discussion this evening. So let's talk about the program's purpose. The purpose of putting in place a beach parking program is to control demand and influence beach parking decisions, to communicate timely information on beach parking availability and alternative options for residents and visitors to consider, to provide parking areas that are safe and secure, and to provide a paid parking program that is convenient, user-friendly, and above all else, provides superior customer service. And lastly, we also want to make sure that through the imposition of this program, we're protecting adjoining neighborhoods and businesses from paid parking overflow impacts, some of which we're currently seeing without having a program and for which we need to be prepared once we implement a program, if that is the will of this body. So that purpose statement has been included within the draft ordinance so that it can be clear both now and as we move forward what it is that we're trying to accomplish through the adoption of this program. So I just mentioned that as the core objectives of the ordinance. The first and foremost is the general policy framework that was mentioned in there is the first thing we lead off with in the ordinance. We're also looking at removing some of the antiquated language that's in our code. We had a lot of references to coin-operated parking meters, things the likes of which you don't see all that much, or at least not with the program that we're going to recommend going forward. We're also going to define the paid beach parking areas. Again, the town has many different properties, but right now, for the purposes of this program, we're only focusing on a certain number. And again, just because it's in the ordinance doesn't mean that you do or do not have to charge for parking. That can be set forth in the resolution, but as part of this overall framework, we're setting forth all of those properties that we believe are part of our beach parking program. And lastly, we want to develop rules and regulations for administering the parking program and the corresponding enforcement measures that are going to be necessary to ensure that people adhere to these regulations. So let's break out the elements of the ordinance. We start off again with the purpose and intent statement to make it clear at the beginning what it is that we're trying to accomplish. We then provide a definition section. The intent of this is to provide clear interpretations for all terms and terminologies that are used in the succeeding sections to make sure it's clear to readers what it is that we're looking to accomplish. We designate paid parking areas. Again, those are all the beach park areas that are listed in there. Does not mean that you have to impose parking at any or all of them. We're just listing those that are part of this program. Fees, payment, and enforcement. This says that if you do decide to put in place parking fees differently than what's in place today, that it will be a mandatory requirement for people to park there to comply with whatever terms you set forth corresponding to those parking fees. We do list certain exceptions. One of the big ones is if you're a resident beach parking pass holder, you are exempt from having to pay these parking fees. And so it's very important that we make sure that it's clear to residents that as part of this program, we're really focused on people who are visiting us, people who are coming from other areas for varying periods of time. But as a resident, if you have a beach parking pass, this really isn't going to apply to you. Rules and regulations, this clearly spells out what behavior is allowed. You need to park in defined spaces. You can't park in the landscaping. You can't park wherever it pleases you. A lot of things that we've seen, this makes clear that not only will you need to pay, if that is the will of council to impose, but you will need to park where it's appropriate or else be subject to the various penalties that are outlined further in this ordinance. And then lastly, we've outlined an appeals process for anybody who should receive a parking citation. This would allow us to administer it on an administrative basis, so it would not be a criminal penalty. It would not go to the magistrate court. This would be something that would be issued directly to the vehicle, whatever condition it's found in. And then we provide an appeals process to ensure due process for those people who receive an appeal. And as outlined in the ordinance, we have it proposed currently as a 3-tiered system. The first level of appeal would be to PCI Municipal Services themselves to resolve any kind of questions. The second would then be to the town attorney, and finally to a court for adjudication. Now let's talk about the corresponding resolution that goes with the ordinance. This is where a lot of the elements of the parking program are laid out and many of the policy considerations that you're going to be asked to deciding on as part of this issue. So first and foremost is parking fees. So this is the rate that would be charged to park in any or all of these spaces. We've also discussed establishing a daily maximum fee in lieu of paying on an hourly basis. The resident beach parking passes, again, because of its interconnectivity to the underlying paid parking, we wanted to make sure to reaffirm who's a resident, how many passes, and what residents should pay to obtain those passes. Hours of operation speaks to all of the standardized hours of operation within the parks. We need to know when they open, we need to know when they close, and then during those hours, when and if we will charge for parking at those locations. The dates for the collection of parking fees, one of the things that you'll see as a recommendation coming out of the committee is that paid parking be imposed seasonally. And as such, we would want to define what that seasonal application would be, and therefore we could create corresponding signage and make sure to advertise and communicate that information to the public both before and after any of the paid parking seasons. We've got a provision in there that allows for the suspension of parking fees related to permitted special event activities. Again, that's something we heard from council members wanting to make sure that we retain that flexibility. And then lastly, general authorization to move forward with implementing and executing the paid beach parking program. So let's look at the comparative market data that went into the Community Services and Public Safety's consideration and recommendations to this body. We surveyed a lot of communities, both within South Carolina and surrounding and comparable areas, and you can see it's a mixed bag in terms of rates. However, ultimately, when you look at these numbers, especially a lot of the communities that charge flat rates instead of paying on an hourly basis, one of our underlying assumptions is that the average parking session for a beachgoer is somewhere around 3.5 hours. And so if you take a $20 per day or $25 per day flat rate and divide that by 3.5, it gives you an hourly parking rate in excess of $5. And so for us, the rates appear to be generally in the range of $3 to $5, with daily maximum rates ranging anywhere from $10 to $25, and then some jurisdictions charging flat rates on the weekends, which typically tend to be the most peak demand times. So because of this, we believe that the recommendations that are coming forward to you are keeping within the general market comparativeness of the areas that are charging. And I would highlight that when we did this research, and we've updated it as of August 1st of this year, one of the things that really stood out to us is the fact that Hilton Head is one of the only communities that does not charge for beach parking. So that is the outlier to us. But in terms of the rates that are proposed, this is really the market data that's based on the recommendations. So let's look at what we're currently doing now. Currently, there are 4 beach parks, Alder Lane, Dreesen, Follyfield, and Islanders, that currently charge for parking. Those rates vary from 50 cents an hour at Dreesen to $1 per hour at Alder Lane, Follyfield, and Islanders. Right now, the park hours vary. So during the summer months, the parks are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and then that changes during the winter months so that they're only open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. One of the recommendations you're going to see is that we're proposing to standardize those hours and make them uniform year-round. We would have the parks open up at 6 a.m. and we would have the parks close at 10 a.m. In thinking about most of the 10 p.m., not 10 a.m. 6 a.m., 10 p.m. Otherwise, you're going to have to move fast. All right. But our thought with that is you're going to capture most, if not all, of the beach-going people and the activities that they want to do. If they want to catch the sunrise at the beach, they're likely to not get there before 6 a.m. in the morning. And if they're staying to sunset, they're likely to not stay later than 10 p.m. So for us, that was really really trying to capture when we would expect most people to come and go from those properties. And right now, they are not seasonal in application. So the rates that are charged are year-round, regardless of time of day, regardless of time of year. We've also highlighted in here that a couple of them, Dreesen Beach Park and Islanders, both have restricted spaces that do not have paid parking on them. They're only limited to pass holders. And so again, we just wanted to call that out in terms of the rates. We don't want people to get confused that they're gonna have to pay for it in addition to getting a parking pass. We've included some budgetary information, more from a historical standpoint, so that you can understand both what this program has cost to date and what it is likely to cost going forward in the future. So right here in front of you, you see that this was the FY24, so last year's budget submission from the contractor. You'll see that a significant portion of this budget was capital technology and expenses. So this was the installation of a lot of the physical equipment that you see out there, the cameras, the gate arms, the hockey pucks, as well as some of the technology that goes with it in terms of being able to process passes, being able to communicate this information, and hopefully here in the not too distant future, we will have a real-time platform to be able to communicate with people about the availability of parking within all of these areas. This is the current FY25 budget. You'll see there's certainly not as much capital technology or expenses. The majority of it's now transitioned into general operating expenses, with the majority of that being salaries, benefits, and labor associated with administering these services. This gives you kind of, I think, a base benchline of the program expenses and what it would be like going forward. We've had some internal calculations about labor and cost expenses that you'll see in a minute. But generally speaking, under the current contract that we have, unless we request increased staffing levels, I believe we can generally expect to see that figure or close thereto on a recurring basis. So what's considered? We went over the current conditions. There was 4 locations ranging from 50 cents an hour to $1 an hour. The number of spaces within those 4 locations is 266. And for purposes of projecting revenues and expenditures, we look at the utilization of those different places based upon times of day and then times of year. Weekends are the busiest as compared to weekdays. The summer months are busier as compared to the winter months. And so you'll see a utilization range of anywhere from 10% to 80% to try and capture those varying levels of demand, but to give us projections that we can use going forward. What we're proposing in terms of recommendations is anywhere from not charging parking at all to charging at all 7 identified locations. The rate would be, again, not charging anything at all to a maximum of $5 an hour is the most. That was a recommendation coming out of the committee. If all 7 locations are included, the total number of parking spaces is 1,101. But with Chaplain Beach Park being exempted during youth recreational sports, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, that drops that figure during that time to 758. Again, assuming the same 10 to 80% utilization, but now standardized hours of operation year-round, and paid parking would be implemented for only a portion of those hours each day. And in terms of setting a cap, we would propose a cap, and there's been varying recommendations with the highest being $30 per day. So let's look at our projections and really some of the underlying elements about how we obtain those projections. First thing that I would highlight is that we are calculating 1,101 parking spaces. So this model assumes that all beach parking locations will impose paid parking. You can see that we've listed all the months here and then the days per month, and then applied that utilization percentage that I mentioned, with some of the winter months being very low and some of the summer months being the highest. And then we look at average parking session during those times. You put those into an algebraic formula, and you come up with these projections at $3 an hour, $5 an hour, at $7 an hour. I've highlighted the $3 an hour column because that is one of the main recommendations coming out of community services and public safety. And so that is one of the ones that we wanted to highlight for your reference. In looking at just a seasonal application of this, it amends the figures, but you'll see only just slightly. If it's year-round collection, we're looking at about 1.6 million in gross collections. And if we're doing just seasonal, it's $100,000 less at 1.5. And looking at our expense projections, again, these are internal numbers. When we were looking at what labor costs would be, we projected it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of this amount, and then other expenses for uniforms, equipment, things like that. But I do want to highlight that this labor figure does not include fringe benefit costs, which would typically be somewhere around 40% of your overall labor expenses. So you would probably need to add in about $150,000 to this figure if you were going to provide that labor on a full-time basis. And again, for reference purposes, PCI's FY25 contract is just a little bit over $600,000. So when you apply the expenses to your revenue projections, your net revenue projections at the recommended $3 an hour seasonal application would net the town approximately $1 million. But again, you've got to take out benefit costs, which would be about $150,000. So just slightly less than $1 million per year. One other thing to note here, within year 6, we assume that these rates would remain flat for a period of time and then would be adjusted for inflation in year 6 moving forward, and then held flat from year 6 through 10. So again, a number of assumptions, but we just want to make sure you understand what went into providing these projections. So in terms of what the town could use this additional revenue for, we wanted to provide you with a list of all the things that the town is currently expending funds on to support our beach parks and beach park operations. And so this chart right here shows a number of things. And again, these are already expenses that are in the FY25 budget that would be eligible for support from beach parking revenues if we wanted to approach it from the standpoint of any excess revenues that are generated are reinvested back within the parking management program. And you can see a significant portion of that is beach renourishment activities at $16 million. But even beyond them, in total, there's $25 million in expenses that the town is looking at incurring related to its beach parking activities. And so we provide this just as information for planning purposes, that if the town decides to move forward, these are things that you could consider in terms of using those excess revenues to reinvest back in the program. So let me summarize the recommendations coming to you out of the Community Services and Public Safety Committee. The first is that resident beach parking passes should be made free instead of the current $15 per pass that is currently charged. A part of that recommendation is to keep the current limit of 2 passes per household the same. As a part of this, and we included this within the staff report and the financial projections, but eliminating the $15 per pass fee would cause the town to collect about $105,000 less in revenue on an annual basis than it currently receives. And so we wanted to make sure to build that into our projections as well. Paid parking would not be imposed at Chaplain Beach Park during the youth recreation seasons. Obviously, the exact timing of that's going to fluctuate from year to year, but what's stated in the documentation that's before you is that the town would directly work with the Island Recreation Association as its recreation services provider to determine in advance what periods of time this would apply to, and then we would prepare appropriate signage and notification to the public so that they would know when parking would be charged and when parking would not be charged. The committee was unable to come to a unified decision in terms of parking rates, and so what you see before you today are several recommendations that the committee was suggesting that council consider. Those recommendations ranged anywhere from a low of $3 per hour to a high of $5 per hour, all of which had a corresponding recommended daily cap. But those caps also changed from a low of $15 per day to a high of $30 per day. Another recommendation was to charge flat rate parking fees for Saturdays and Sundays. And again, a recommendation was a low of $20 per day, a high of $25 per day. And then an additional recommendation was to consider possibly just imposing the flat parking rates during the months of June, July, and August only. The committee recommended that the parks remain open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that parking be charged within that time frame from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. This would allow residents and visitors, well, residents, if you have a parking pass, are gonna park for free regardless. But if you're a resident without a pass or you're a visitor, you would still have hours of the day that you could go to the beach without having to pay for paid parking. So not only would there be a seasonal application in terms of the time of the year, but there would also be hours during each of the days, even when parking's being charged, that people could park for free outside of that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. window. And then lastly, in order to respond to concerns that have been posed regarding the impacts to employee parking opportunities through imposing paid parking, the committee recommended that the town look at establishing a park and ride program using town-owned property, and ultimately that would require the town to contract with a transportation services provider in order to facilitate this remote park and ride opportunity. So those were the recommendations coming out of committee. And what's before you tonight is essentially those same questions, but you get to take up the committee's recommendation and make your own determinations about whether or not you support it, whether or not you want to amend it, or whether or not you want to go in a different direction altogether. And so we've tried to bucket those policy questions, both in terms of the resident parking passes, all of the factors in establishing a parking rate, so the locations, some or all, the hours of operation, the time of collection, the seasonal or year-round collection, and then ultimately the hourly rate and any corresponding daily maximum. And then lastly, if you do decide to impose it at all locations, do you believe that we need to address employee parking? And if so, there's the different options that are presented there for your consideration. We could set aside dedicated parking spaces just for employee parking purposes. We could provide discounted monthly passes to qualified employees. And then we could also, as the committee's recommended, create a remote lot and shuttle service to address these needs. So that covers both the ordinance and the resolution, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, so first of all, we will go to the ordinance first, and we're going to open it up for public comment on that. Just as a reminder, I'd like to remind everyone that the new public comment ordinance that was adopted in June states that anyone wishing to make a public comment must fill out a form prior to the meeting. Kim, has anyone signed up for this discussion?
Yes, I have 3 people signed up for 8A and B.
We're going to do 8A first.
Okay. You ready for public
Yes.
comment? Okay, Lee Lucier.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Town Manager, Town Council, and Mayor for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Lee Lucier, CEO of the Richards Group, local business owner and Port Royal resident. We are here today to discuss paid beach parking on Hilton Head Island. This discussion encapsulates obvious issues and concerns of many residents, business owners, and visitors with the proposed policies. Charging for parking will impact local businesses in the surrounding neighborhood in many ways, such as overflow parking, guests seeking a free alternative to paid parking, reduction in ancillary spending, and additional taxation to our valuable guests, which support our island immensely. I want to discuss the obvious portions of this ordinance that I know have been discussed in one or many discussions over the past 4 years. The Pope Avenue corridor is home to over 130 businesses, 1,500 local employees, numerous local events, and $170 million in local sales revenue for its constituents. In addition, Pope Avenue collects over $1.4 million in county green space tax, $1.5 million in local sales tax, and substantial amounts of A-tax, hospitality tax, and liquor surcharges, just to name some of the Pope Avenue income streams to our island from this corridor. We are the main street of the island. Why is the council looking at beach parking charges? Well, that is a question that I've talked with all council members and several town employees about, and here is their answer summary to that question. We need to have income to offset the cost of parking consultants. We're not sure. Doesn't make sense at this time with so many pertinent town issues at hand. I don't agree with the policy, but it's coming. It's already cooked. Be prepared for it. The Coligny lot should be carved out. Coligny beach parking should not be part of this program. I need to research the legality and need of paid parking program. We need to limit off-island traffic somehow. Hopefully this will do it. I haven't time to research it, but I will. How are we going to recoup the money we've already spent on a parking program that doesn't exist? I truly appreciate the openness and honesty of these statements, but these are all just statements, not good reasons to possibly jeopardize the livelihoods of 1,500 residents. In closing, I also ask the town to research the case of Circle Square Company versus the Atlantis Development Company, a Supreme Court opinion in regards to covenants, CCR, and commerce in South Forest Beach, to be reviewed to ensure the legality of paid parking that is being discussed today, since the Supreme Court has said there cannot be commerce on South Forest Beach unless it is lodging. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucia. Next, Kim.
Amy Fee.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, and all of Town Council. My name is Amy Fee, and I'm from Forest Beach. This is a sensitive issue for the entire community, residents, businesses, and employees. What if I need a third pass? What's that process going to look like? I think it's a complex issue, and I'm not sure if all the data and all the information is in at this time for us to move forward with a decision. I think there are going to be many downstream effects and unforeseen, unintended consequences that impact all of us. Island-wide, our Bluffton neighbors. I don't have a solution today, but I hope to work with Town Council for one. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fee. Kim.
I just received a comment form from Skip Hoagland, who would like to speak on this item.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what we heard is a typical bureaucratic lawyer presentation. Unfortunately, overdevelopment and too many tourists have caused this same bureaucracy, rules and regulations. Who wants this to go enjoy the beach? We need to follow Rome, Italy lead and charge a $10 per person tourist tax upon check-in and check-out to our island. There'll be no labor involved in this, and $10 times $3 million just raised us $30 million. Read about it on Google and look what other resorts are doing. They're so inundated now that they're charging, making the tourists pay. Why should 38,000 people pay for 3 million people? Increase taxes, can't find a place to park to go to the beach. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. If these folks are gonna come and enjoy this island, they're gonna pay with the rest of us. And $10 is not too much to ask. $10 times 3 million times 3 million tourists is $30 million. We heard from Gruber, by the time you get through with all the beach patrols and all the labor and all this, the overhead is crazy. My plan is raise 30 million, pay it at check-in and check-out, put the 30 million in the bank account and start paying for our bike paths, our beaches, and other things. We also need to stagger the check-in and check-out days. Everybody coming on Saturday, living in Windmill Harbor and some of the other people in this room, to be caught in this traffic every Saturday is a nightmare. It's not tolerable. It's beyond tolerable for anybody. So we have to stagger. I don't care what the rental companies say. I don't give a hoot what the hotels say. You're gonna have to stagger and check in and check out to help reduce this traffic. And this might have an impact of us not having to do this 7 or 11 lane bridge. This could also look at the study on that and see how that might play in by doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. We'll bring it back to the dais. Is there a motion from council on 8A?
Mayor, I move to approve the adoption of it on first reading.
Second.
We have a first and second discussion. Mr. Brown, I'll start with you.
And we have the page with the choices back up.
We're not talking about the choices just yet. This is just for the ordinance.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up a copy of the draft ordinance, put it up on the screen. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna let the expert do that. Kim, would you mind, please? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think it would be useful for people to understand how the system would work, the electronic sensors and so forth, and how we've been calling them passes, but I don't think they'll be passes for residents. It'll be free use of that. The technology needs to be explained, I think.
When we start talking about that, ask them that question. That'd be perfect.
I will.
Thank you. There we go. All right. We got a copy of the ordinance pulled up. What questions can I answer?
Mr. Mayor, my questions and concerns are really related to the resolution.
Okay.
And not the ordinance.
Okay.
So I'd reserve
All right.
my time for them.
Ms. Bryson.
Mr. Gruber, thank you for the information presentation, both here and to the Community Services and Public Safety Committee. It's a complex issue in many ways. As I understand it, the amendments to the parking ordinance, there's now in Title 12, Chapter 3, I think it is, and then there's some chapters within that. So my primary question is, I think a lot of residents have questions about the language here that defines resident. As I understand it, that is the same language that we are currently using, so there's no change in who is defined as a resident with this amendment.
Yes, ma'am. Town Council adopted a resolution in 2022 defining an island resident and set forth various criteria both for property ownership or for rentals, but essentially establishing minimum criteria that have to be shown in order to be considered an island resident. That language was carried over verbatim.
Okay, all right. And the difference in taking the two together, the ordinance and the resolution, is that residents, instead of, there'll still be 2 passes per resident, per household. But now they're charged $15 per pass, and the new proposal is no cost to residents. So
That is the
that's only a
recommendation.
different part as far as residents passes go. Okay, all right. And in addition, you mentioned during your presentation, there's a lot of antiquated language. So that's a primary purpose in the ordinance itself.
Correct.
And
So, great example of that's in this first paragraph. It says parking meters to be installed in parking meter spaces. Again, with our program, we'll have text-to-pay capabilities, so we won't have actual parking meters with coin-operated machines. It'll be something you can pull up on your phone. Now, there will also be a kiosk there that if you needed to pay directly, there would be that availability, but there's not going to be the traditional meter per space that you may see in some communities.
which might help to address some of the questions Mr. Stanford was asking to be addressed. And as I understand it, the parking meters that we use now, there are no longer parts for them. So what we're using, in addition to antiquated language, is antiquated systems that, it's kind of like when you buy a really old car, it's hard to get parts. Believe me, I've got a 1999.
Yes,
So it updates our ordinance and updates our system. But it does not require fees in the ordinance. It provides authority to adopt fees if we choose to do so.
That is correct, and it specifically referenced that council can establish those fees via resolution. And again, the intent of that was to allow for more flexibility, that if council wanted to make changes to any or all parts of it, they could do it through a more simple mechanism of a resolution as compared to an ordinance.
But it does list areas where parking fees could be charged. It doesn't require them to be charged there by ordinance. It just lists the
That's
areas
correct.
where it could be
And the intent behind that is the town owns numerous properties all across the island, many of which are not under consideration for paid parking. This program was really focused on paid beach parking. And so we wanted to identify which of those properties we believe met that criteria and therefore listed them in there. But it then goes on to further state that parking in any or all of those areas would be established by a separate resolution.
Okay. And it also provides for exemptions, such as for special permitted events, particularly at Low Country Celebration Park, where the symphony might be there, or other arts or crafts or music festivals. So there is an exemption for charging for parking in the ordinance at the discretion of the town manager for those events.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, right. And then the other thing is that with regard to enforcement, there's also now some antiquated language about who and how the parking regulations are enforced. And so it updates those enforcement regulations as well.
Correct. Back in the day, you would receive a citation and you would have to go to court. And in theory, if you didn't pay that citation, a bench warrant could be issued for your arrest. That is not the program that we are proposing to move forward with. And in fact, we're kind of modeling it after some other communities that have a similar administrative penalty. It's primarily administered by the parking management company or by the municipality itself, but you do still build in due process. That way, if something happens and there's an issue, it can be resolved, hopefully without having to go to a court, but ultimately could, if necessary, go to a court for adjudication.
Okay, I've tried to ask you certain areas where we were updating and taking out antiquated language. Have I missed anything that you think it's essential for the public to know about the ordinance language?
I don't believe so, but I would just state, generally speaking, anybody who's looking at the materials that are included in your packets and that are posted online, we try to identify any language within the code that's going to be removed through a strike through, and any language that's going to be incorporated as new language with a double underline. And then if you see other language that doesn't have either of those, then it's existing language that would just remain as currently stated.
Okay, and this being part of the municipal code requires 2 readings.
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ames?
I'd like to thank Representative Bryson for answering and addressing all of my questions.
You're welcome.
No comments.
Ms. Becker?
Thank you. Those were great explanations as we were walked through all of the points of change, and I appreciate the answers. Thank you so much.
Mr. Alfred?
In my mind, first of all, in the resolution, you stated a number of choices that council has to make. I think one of the at least to me, the more significant determination that council has to make is whether or not to include the Coligny area. That's in the ordinance.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether you want to discuss that now or whether you want to go through the whole discussion and come back to that later. But to me, that's one of the most important matters we have to deal with today.
Yeah, Josh, I would ask that you in depth explain.
Yes.
Just that, not just Coligny, but each one of them, when they can be or not be within that area.
Yes, sir. So the intent behind this section, when I say this section, I'm specifically referring to what would be new section 12-6-112, and it says designation of paid parking areas. The intent behind this was to identify those town-owned properties that may be under consideration to have paid parking applied to that property. This is not an exhaustive list of all the town-owned properties. So we've got, Jarvis Creek and Barkerfield and a whole host of others that are not on here because those aren't currently under consideration. But when we started this exercise 4 years ago, we were asked to focus on beach parking specifically. And so the 7 properties that you see listed here are the 7 properties that we believe represent beach parking areas on the island. And so we wanted to identify those just to make it clear that those are the ones that are eligible to be part of this program. But this sentence right here really speaks to your concern, I think, Mr. Alfred, which says the town council shall determine the appropriate rates for the paid parking areas by resolution. And so if you wanted to say exempt the Coligny Beach lot from paid parking, you would just essentially set the parking at that location at $0. And so we wanted to make sure that it's there, it's referenced, but in terms of whether or not there's going to be paid parking and what that dollar value would be, we leave that to the resolution that council would consider.
Thank you. Very clever solution.
Stanford.
Thank you. Council has been considering this now for 4 years. It's time for us to go ahead and make a decision and decide to implement this. I've been disappointed that it hasn't been administered before, but we're now down where the next season, hopefully we'll have something. I think it's important for the public to understand the nuts and bolts about how this system operates, because it is new and it's different and it's high tech. Can you give a description of that, please?
We actually have our parking vendor here with us this evening. If I could, I'd call upon Matt to come up and just kind of give us a brief overview of how they implement the current regulations and then how they would go about implementing all of the various technology applications if this goes live.
Even better, thank you.
Hi. So currently what we do is to apply for the resident beach permits, you can apply online or you can come to our office or you can mail in the permit. And then what we do is we staff islanders 7 days a week, and we have someone out there that as cars enter, they scan the plate, It's basically a cell phone. They scan the plate and it shows up right away that they have a permit. So that's how we recognize it. At the other locations, our cameras are up, they are operating correctly now, and they read it as well if it's a permit holder or not. So when we go to enforcement, we would know right away if someone enters a lot, whether or not they need.
Push to the microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. So when we go to enforce, if we do go to, with the system and we go to enforcement, as they enter the lot, we would know right away if they have a permit or not. If say, for example, someone does enter the lot, does not have a permit, they would have a certain amount of time, about 10 minutes probably, to make a payment. If after the 10 minutes they don't make that payment, we would get an alert that this car with license plate, ABC 123 is at Cligney, did not pay, and needs to be going ticketed. And at Islanders, the reason we staff that is to make sure that the resident spaces are protected for the residents. So as someone comes in, if they're not a permit holder, we direct them to the meters right away. The technology for paying the meters as we go forward, we would implement a text to park payment option. So basically they would have a QR code they could scan, or they would text. Each lot would have its own code. So as they enter the lot, so for example, say they go to Islanders, pay, the code would be, for example, DPM. They would text that code to a certain number, and then they would get a text back. And in that text back would be a link that would bring them directly to where they would pay. And they just enter their credit card, enter how many hours they want to pay for, and then they would pay it. And with this system too, they would get an alert about 15 minutes before their parking time is set to expire to offer them to, do you want to add more time? So they wouldn't have to run back and pay. They could do it right from the beach.
Okay, so if I am a resident in Georgia and I want to go to the Coligny Beach, how do I pay for the parking?
There'll be signs throughout the lot that will have a QR code or the code of that lot to text to get the payment. If you scan the QR code, you'll immediately be brought directly to the page to pay. Once you send that text, you'll get the text back. You just click on the link in the text and it'll bring you directly to the page to pay.
So I have to disclose my tag number, or I have to use an app in order to pay that parking.
Yeah, it's technically it's not an app. It's just a text you get. It's nothing you have to download to your phone. It'd just be a text you get, and then you'd enter your plate number and your credit card information, and it would then you determine how long you want to pay for.
And if I don't do that and I park there, what happens?
Then we would get alerted that a car has parked, did not pay, and then we would go issue the ticket.
And so enforcement would mean what?
The citation would be issued for non-payment, and then depending on what the fees are established, they would receive that.
This type of system has been implemented by your company in other similar communities, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Currently, the closest ones we operate in are City of Folly Beach and Isle of Palms.
Okay, and that's been successful in that community?
Yes, it has. We started in Isle of Palms this past March, and we started in Folly Beach last year in May.
Does the Isle of Palms and the other community have exemptions for residents?
Yes, they do. It's similar to here. They have to prove residency, and then their plate is uploaded in the system, so it knows right away that it's a resident permit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I just want to clarify one thing for myself and for anyone who might be listening. All the data that's collected is not stored. The town does not store that information, neither does PCI, correct?
Correct. It's stored for a certain amount of time, I believe.
And I know exactly where you're going with that. So it is not personally identifying information. So we'll know the state that the plate comes from, but we won't know the name of the person whose plate that is registered to. And that was something that we set up at the outset of the contract with PCI.
Correct. It's been one of my concerns from the beginning, just making sure that everyone else is aware of that this isn't a data collection process and retention at all. Okay, thank you.
In the installations you have in the Charleston area at Isle of Palms and so forth, are there commercial areas near those beach areas that are impacted at all?
There are businesses. They have a main street there that leads, it's like directly across the street from the main access to the beach. And there's stores on both sides, restaurants, bars, souvenir shops on both sides of the street.
And are those?
Those are enforced, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Those are paid to park and they are enforced daily.
Are those public lots or the private lots that are?
Well,
I'll try to help you. I'm sorry. So for both of those areas, this is on-street parking. This is not on private property, but there's on-street public parking, which is pay to park. And so to clarify, that's what's enforced in terms of the parking requirement.
Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
since he's answering questions. Mr. Gruber mentioned that the technology will have the ability for us to sort of forewarn those that may be thinking about visiting our beaches. Can you talk through that a little bit as to how that technology works?
Yeah, we have, it's a partner of ours that we contracted with that would it shows the occupancy of the lots. So it's a website, it's based on a website. You pull up the website and it would show you, for example, say you're planning to go to Cligny, it would show that, it's 85% full. So, there's about 15% occupancy, and it would be at all of the locations listed above with the exception of Alder Lane. So every one of those 6 locations, you'd be able to pull it up on your phone and see how many spaces are available at each of the lots.
So there would be sort of an educational process that
Correct.
we have to go through so that our visitors would understand that we now have this available. Okay. And a follow-up to Councilman Alfred's question about Folly Beach. Can you give us a little bit of information as to how that is going, the experience, the amount of violations? Do you have any data that you can share with us on that?
I don't have specific numbers, but I do know that basically the town, the contract was written a little bit differently. So we do have stats as far as how many citations are issued, and the citation number are up as well as the payment numbers. So before, in both locations, Isle Palms and Folly Beach, the police were enforcing it. And so now that we've taken it over, the citation number has gone up as well as the payment numbers.
And has that, in turn, made you have to go up as far as staff levels and that sort of thing?
No, they've maintained the same staff levels the whole time they've had the
All right,
contract.
thank you.
All right, Mr. Gruber, I got a couple of questions for you. Outside of the great questions that have already been asked. The average parking sessions that you calculated,
3.5 hours, again.
how did we come up with that?
It's based upon observed data, but again, it's going to fluctuate.
Can you explain observed data?
So that's really kind of understanding when people come into the lot, how long they stay and when they leave. So when we look at some of our busier parking lots, they're typically full by about 10 o'clock in the morning. They start filling or opening back up about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, about
There's not an Excel spreadsheet that we could download to show that car A stayed there for, okay. That answers that. It's people know that we've acquired some properties, and acquiring some properties. They're not listed here.
Yep.
Are they part of this?
So they could be. And the one that I would say we could incorporate if the council wanted to would be the former Wild Wing property, because we have closed on that property. The other one at this point, I wouldn't, just because we haven't closed on it, so we don't own it. If needed, we could come back at second reading and revise it to add it if we've closed by that point in time, or at some point in time in the future come back. I will also say, though, that part of it also kind of depends upon some of the policy considerations that you're talking about, because depending upon if we impose parking or not, we may or may not need to incorporate that in a certain way.
Right. Okay, that's all I've got for now.
One more, Mr. Mayor. I think it's confusing to show Islanders Beach Park in this list of paid parking areas. Maybe that should be footnoted to say, except for residents, or something like that.
So I footnoted it in my presentation, but the reason why I think it's still important to keep here is for the fact that there are 25 public parking spaces within Islanders Beach Park that are available on a first come, first served basis. And so any parking rate that you establish should apply to those 25 spaces as well, which is why it's on this list.
I still think it's confusing. Residents will be concerned that they're going to have to start to pay to park.
Now, and we can try to maybe clarify that a little bit, but I would also note that if you're an island resident who has a sticker and you park in the metered space, you can park there for free. And again, it's a first come, first served basis. And once they're all filled up, the attendants who are there 7 days a week will ensure that people who don't have resident passes aren't adding to the congestion of the traffic in that lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Mayor,
we,
if I can just follow up on that question. Would that change, would your analysis on that change at all once those paid metered parking spaces at Islanders are removed from within inside the beach park to the, prior to attendant?
Unless we're
section?
going to call it a new park, which I don't think we would want to do just because that would be confusing. I think it would need to remain on here as part of the ordinance. But again, in terms of setting a rate for it, we could address that by the resolution. But I think it's, even if it's inside or outside, I think it's still going to be perceived as part of Islanders Beach Park.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, there's a possibility after Islanders Beach Park, we could put in parentheses, only 25 designated non-resident spaces, something like that, if you wanted some clarification.
okay, so we've got a motion by Ms. Bryce and a second by Ms. Becker to approve an ordinance of the town of Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, amending Title 12, Chapter 3 of the Municipal Code entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic Control, parking to revise regulations related to paid parking and other matters related thereto, and provide severability and an effective date. First reading. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. So moved, 7-0. Now we'll move on to 8B. Consideration of a resolution adopting a beach parking schedule. The Community Service Committee met. We went through all that. Kim, do we have anybody signed up to speak for 8B?
I have 4 people.
Okay,
Skip Hoagland,
okay, he passes.
Cheryl Kipple,
Ms. Klippel?
Hello, everyone. My name is Cheryl Klippel. I have been a resident of Hilton Head for 34 years. I'm also a business owner. I have 3 businesses on Pope Avenue. One, Watusi Cafe, the second one, Pelican's Pouch, and then Island Girl, which is located in Cligney. My concern is, well, because it affects me and my business and my livelihood, the Cligney parking. I feel that imposing parking a fee, people are going to try to look for free parking. And they're going to be taking up spaces and going to the beach and not shopping in the stores because there's no parking available to them. Watusi Cafe is actually right next to Enchiladas, and I know y'all are working on closing that property. So that also is a consideration. If that becomes paid parking, then people are going to come to my parking lot for free parking. I don't have the resources to be able to have someone stay in my parking lot to monitor. So I think that's going to adversely affect my businesses. You have the word free parking for residents. Well, that sounds great, residents of Hilton Head. But guess what? Because of lack of affordable housing, my people aren't residents of Hilton Head. They come from Beaufort, they come from Bluffton, they come from Richland. And then you want to give them a pass, a reduction fee for parking, but who's gonna pay for that? I am, because I'm certainly not gonna make my employees that are struggling to make it work on Hilton Head to pay a parking fee. So that's what I have before you today, is just think about the business owners that's gonna be affected by this revenue. It's gonna have a negative impact, I feel, greatly for Cligney. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klippel. Next, Kim. Kimberly?
yes. Lee Lucier,
It's great to be able to speak twice since there's 2 topics on this, so I can bring up some questions that were brought up thankfully by you, and I think still unanswered. Of the municipalities that were talked about with PCA and Josh, as far as paid beach parking, which ones actually have a commercial district next to their parking? I've looked on the map since we've been here. I can't find any. So I think using a model or a comparison is flawed. That's 1. 2, do the rates achieve the goal? What is the goal? Again, I think the real goal here is to slow tourism and slow traffic. The rates aren't going to do it. You can't change behavior by changing a dollar. Again, I think it's a flawed budget or it's presented to you. I didn't write the budget, Again, you look at the budget, approximately $1 million after you do expenses, but then you have to take out $100,000 for revenue you get from passes, and then you hope you fill all the numbers. But then also, if you're gonna hand out 60,000 passes as a community, where's the cost to hand out 60,000 passes to the residents? That's not gonna be free. Somebody's gonna have to run that. And then lastly, how do rental vehicles work? Who collects the tickets? PCI collects the tickets? What's their margin of cost to collect these tickets? How much money do they get from the fines? How many fines have they written on Folly Beach this year? 7,000 is the number I was told. Where does that money go? Does it go to PCI? It goes to the town. Does it go to the coffer, the budget, or back to them? Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next.
Amy Fee.
Hi, so I just have a couple of follow-ups from the previous statement. So I'm assuming that the citations are issued to the vehicle in this case? Okay, and then, so what happens if I take that ticket and I just throw it away and I ignore it? Are we gonna go through the court system and stop someone from registering their vehicle further? So that's a question. Then overflow parking, to this business owner's point, the people are gonna be looking for free parking. They're gonna be parking in shop spaces. They're gonna be parking in church parking lots. They're gonna be parking in neighborhoods. What is that kind of enforcement gonna look like? Are we gonna tow? Are we gonna ticket? What's that implication? What are those costs? And we don't really have a lot of signage in the area about no parking. So I think there's some confusion there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Heather Roth. Good afternoon, Heather Rath for the record, Hilton Head Island resident. I'm speaking for myself, Leslie and Jared Richardson, and the over 60 Coligny business owners who are also residents of our island. I'm strongly opposed to moving this forward for the following reasons. Number one, lack of 2024 data. It's alarming that we are making such a significant decision without considering 2024 numbers. With market conditions constantly shifting, we need current real-time data to guide these policies. Two, representation. Ward 3 will soon have a new representative who actually lives in the Coligny district for the first time in decades. It's only fair that they have a voice and a vote on this issue. Three, fiscal impact. Every law in Columbia and every ordinance in Beaufort County requires a fiscal impact report based off sales tax revenue. Given that Coligny is the largest commercial district and the largest sales tax base on Hilton Head Island, council could and should direct the town's revenue department to issue a detailed report regarding the sales tax impact from Coligny on our state, county, and local annual budgets before any decisions are made. Fourth, consultants and costs. Paid parking seems to be driven by consultants, not necessity. The Coligny Beach parking lot has been full fewer than 30 days this year. Last weekend, I watched as 3 parking attendants stood in front of Coligny Beach Park with less than 100 cars in the parking lot. Please make this make sense. 5, community partnerships. Expanding our transportation and people moving systems to residential areas could help alleviate parking issues without burdening residents or businesses. As an initial stakeholder in the trolley service, I can tell you the original intent was to service residential neighborhoods such as Palmetto Bay Marina, Broad Creek Landing, Oakview, Jonesville, Jarvis Creek Club, Ashton Cove, Cordillo, and Yacht Cove. This would reduce congestion and add a residential amenity to our island. Residents are more likely to trust and use these services than our visitors. There are also community partnership opportunities around digital wayfinding during our peak months of June and July. Speaking of June and July, this is my next point. Summer's over. August is no longer a summer month due to Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina school start deadlines. Please know the effects of changes from our feeder markets and their school start dates on our local economy. And last, time portal. We need to look back and understand why paid parking didn't work before and why we changed it. Councilman John Safay, who was my mentor, listened to feedback from stakeholders, primarily residents, who strongly objected to paid parking, seeing it as an unnecessary layer of regulation and bureaucracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, Kim?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to take a moment here and talk about some suggestions. This is what I support. Our resident beach parking patches to be free and remain limited to 2 per household. It's good for island residents. Set a rate of $3 per hour, which will keep the town competitive with other coastal communities. Establish a maximum daily rate of $15 per day, Monday through Friday, flat rate, $20 per day per vehicle, Saturdays and Sundays. Apply seasonal beach parking from May 1st until September 7th, just after Labor Day, to target the busiest times. Adopt standardized operating hours for all beach parks from 6 to 10. Limit paid parking hours to being from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., which will allow for daily opportunities. Chaplain, remain exempt from paid beach parking fees during all youth sports. This program, utilized correctly, will give us an opportunity to create a municipal court and to create enforcement. We don't have an enforcement opportunity at this point in time. We have beach renourishment that is coming up next year. We have numbers that are down year over year from the past 2 years. Revenues are down. We have to be careful what we put into place to make certain that we're not hurting local businesses. The unintended consequences of creating a paid parking in the Pope Avenue area could be very detrimental to our business community. We have got to look at our business community. You know, I asked the question, observed data. That's not scientific. This is a resolution, so that means we can come back and change it after a year if it's not working. We have got to have the data in place to make a good decision. We do not have the data in place right now to say that putting paid parking, except for what happened years ago when the parking was there, which was a failure. But right now, we don't have good data, current data, to tell us that this is what we need to do. So I propose that Pope Avenue area is no charge. $3 an area in other locations with a $15 or $20 max a day. And I think that it gets us through a beach renourishment time when, as they're going to Coligny or that area, they may not go because there's beach renourishment. And if there is paid parking in that area, it may deter them even more from going down. That kills our business community. But we have to think what we're here for. And it is the residents, and our residents have businesses there and they work there. They're not all coming in from Hardyville, Richland, but a lot of them are there. It is a high economic impact area. Let's not let all the horses out of the gate at once. Let's let them start to jog a little bit, one at a time. See what works, but not let them all out and try to corral them back in. Let's take a smart approach on this. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion so we can continue the discussion. I move that we approve a resolution setting forth the following elements for a paid beach parking program. Resident beach parking passes will be free and will remain limited to 2 per household. The town will charge a rate of $3 per hour at all beach parking facilities with the ability to provide a maximum daily rate option of $15 per day, Monday through Friday, and impose a flat rate of $20 per day per vehicle on Saturdays and Sundays. The town will collect beach parking fees seasonally from March 1st until September 7th. The operating hours for all town beach parks will be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. year-round. The town will collect beach parking fees from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Kaplan Park will remain exempt from beach parking fees during all youth recreational sports seasons. Beach parking areas within the Pope Avenue Business District will remain free of charge, but we are subject to be reviewed and revised at a later date.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
May I ask a question of clarification on the motion? Part B under section 2 of the draft refers to excluding June, July, and August. I gather your motion excludes May plus June, July, and August, in effect?
Exclude?
No, it doesn't exclude.
Those are the months that it's operable, I've got it back. And it includes May, June, July, and August.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so Mr. Alford, one of the recommendations coming out of the committee was to have a flat rate on all Saturdays and Sundays during the seasonal collection. There was another recommendation to only have a flat rate solely for the months of June, July, and August. But I believe the motion is to have it on any Saturday and Sunday during that seasonal collection period from March to September.
Discussion, Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. Gruber, I'm going back to the mayor's comment on observed data.
Yes, sir.
If we're not charging in the Pope Avenue area, the technology is still there, so we will still be able to collect data as far as how many ins and outs, time of stay, and so on. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Okay.
We will have that, and we are beginning to collect that data. I know PCI has some of it. It is not a complete year-round picture at this point yet, but it is something that they are starting to monitor in terms of number of vehicles in, number of vehicles out, and then aligning that to the days of the week, months of the year.
Sure. So since this is our first time as a full council having this discussion, I appreciate that we've had it at the committee level for a long time. Some of the concerns that I have, one, the data is not necessarily true and clear at the moment, so we will be getting better at that with this program. But when we start to really look at the business area down there, and that's been mentioned already, we've had already one false start with this effort years ago. But more importantly, with the amount of employees that are in that area on a daily basis, and them not having any opportunities besides to park within business parking lots or our public parking lots, I feel strongly that we need to be moving in a direction to move people around outside of their cars. I think that's so important for us. I appreciate that we've taken a look at some of the current expenses around our beach services, but I think that is another one that we need to look at more heavily. Obviously, we've sort of stuck our toe into overflow parking at USCB and that sort. But I think parking rides are something that we need to be looking at very seriously, and just moving people around from a work standpoint on Hilton Head is important as well. So I can see this evolving over time once we have more data in hand. But I agree with the mayor. We definitely need to have data to make those decisions. I'm just at this point planting seeds, all right? And as far as the information flow is concerned, obviously PCI is our vendor, but I want to be certain that we are receiving all of the information and not just the cars in and out. I think the appeals piece is important. The violation piece is important to us because we are trying to set forth this atmosphere for our visitors as they're coming to Hilton Head, and we don't want it just to be a complaint box, right? And that's not Hilton Head. We want to make sure that folks are enjoying themselves as they're here. Obviously, we want them to follow the rules. If they don't, we will definitely act accordingly. But at the same time, we need to have a really good understanding as to what that looks like, from a performance standpoint, also from a branding standpoint. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I'm gonna go down here. Becker?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Well, thank you for your introduction and comments. It does seem to me, if I recall back almost a year ago, those are the exact same ones I made. That we proceed with the program and we exempt the Coligny area so that we could collect the data. that was not agreeable to this council, or at least to the committee coming out. So I guess a year makes a big difference in terms of how things are viewed. But had we listened to the suggestions a year ago, we would be in a better position today. Just a comment, an observation of my own. Question for I keep hearing all seasonal sports. Is that different than what we have currently written into the resolution?
I don't believe it is. I mean, ultimately, it's generally speaking from Memorial Day to Labor Day, but not specific to those two holidays. It's just a general time frame. The hottest times of the year are the times that they're not offering youth sports. And so what is listed in the resolution, or maybe the ordinance, I can't remember, but wherever it's listed, it specifically references that the town will coordinate that schedule with the Island Recreation Association and then publish that information to the public in advance.
Okay, thank you. Another observation, when we continue to hear about revenue being down over the last 2 years, I think it was a false expectation for anyone to have thought that the COVID years were going to be the new standard. And so I would love to hear more about the revenue being down and what that relationship is to the COVID years versus those just prior to see where we actually are in numbers, or whether we're just settling back to a place where we were and we need to look at that a little bit differently moving forward. I have a few things here. Josh, you had up on the screen a revenue chart, expectations with a variety of different factors there. Do you have one that would show us what the revenue would be without the Coligny parking lot part included in that? And just as an addition to that, I think it was mentioned, and I want to highlight, the town council has agreed and has already closed on the Wild Wing property in the Coligny area with anticipation that that building will be taken down and that space made into how many additional parking spots is it?
Depending on how you look at it, anywhere between 110 to 140.
So an additional 110 to 140 parking spaces coming online. And what did we pay for that parking, for that Wild Wings property? Help me remember that.
Approximately $4 million.
Approximately $4 million, and then the additional cost of raising the building and creating a parking space. Those are real dollars being spent to create more opportunity for parking in the Coligny area for the businesses, for the additional employees, and for our visitors. So in addition to that, we also are just about to close on Enchiladas. And again, how many parking spaces will be available there?
116.
Yeah, I believe it's between 115 and 130.
So another additional 115 to 130. So as you can see, we're close to 300 additional parking spaces that your tax dollars, well into the millions. I believe that property was also 3 million, thereabouts, dollars of money spent to create additional parking opportunities in the Coligny area. So while I hear the concerns of the business owners there, I would also like to highlight there has been a concerted effort at great expense to increase the number of parking opportunities. And one step further, I had made a recommendation that we provide opportunities for those employees who live off island to have a reduced rate or have a conversation about how we would try to alleviate any burden that may be put on those who would not naturally receive a parking pass, free opportunity by virtue of being a resident. So those are points that I want to make sure are well understood by everyone as we're moving forward. So we've talked about a number of things here. And in terms of a park and ride for visitors, one of the charts that you also had up here, and it'll be the second one that I refer back to, but one of the ones that I want to also go to is where you had a list of expenses that the town incurs, $25,500 a year for all of these additional costs so that we can take care of our beaches, take care of the parking lots, all in an effort to make sure that Hilton Head remains a pristine beach, well cared for, and at the elite level the world-class level that I know that we have always been and expect to always be. So those are real costs. And now that I've finished with that, if we can look at what now the revenue would be without the Coligny.
So based upon the projections, it's about $400,000 less in annual revenue if you were to exempt Coligny, which is about 25% of the overall program revenue across all areas.
So if we were just under $1 million before, so basically half of what we otherwise would have been anticipating.
And again, that's based upon a number of assumptions, but with the data that we have, that would be our projection.
Okay, so those are real numbers and real facts. One other that I think is important for us, as we've discussed this, we kind of have heard that $3 rather than the $5 is a recommendation that's come out. I'm going to suggest a compromise at $4, and I will give you the reasons for why. Compromise at $4 is due to the fact that our nearest beach neighbor is Tybee Island, and they charge $4 an hour. If in the past we can all agree on some observed data that we have had an influx of folks coming from Georgia who otherwise may have gone to the Tybee Island beach, now coming to Hilton Head because Tybee instituted a parking fee, we certainly want to see that we are at least at the same level as our nearest beach neighbor. So $4 to me seems to be the spot where we stay competitive, and perhaps then some of the additional influx of folks who come onto the island and don't necessarily, again, observe data, spend their money. And I believe there was an article recently that I read in the Island Packet, I think it came out either early this morning or yesterday, where it was a quote from a business owner in Coligny that those who come onto the island don't necessarily spend their money in the shops and the restaurants nearby. And you can read it for yourself. So all that having been said, I would like to suggest that the $3, I can understand the reasoning that you've presented. I hope that you also understand that $4 seems to be a sweet spot that will better serve our community in the future. And again, this is a resolution. As we collect real data, which we should have at this point already, but later when we have it, we can maybe adjust it to where it might otherwise be seen to be more appropriate, whether it's $5 or the $3. But for now, I think the $4 should be what we should be considering. Thank you.
Thank you. First, Josh, is there a definition of the business district?
There's not a formal definition of it. We've just been referring it to as the Pope Avenue Business District, given the location of the beach parking areas and they're all being along Pope Avenue.
I would suggest that a definition at some point would be appropriate, but what you're talking about is all properties that are fronting on Pope Avenue.
Correct. And we looked at it when we tried to get an idea of what that would encompass. We used our GIS division and we used Coligny Beach Park as a center point, and we did a 100-yard radius of 300 feet from that location, and then use that to identify a property list, and then use the property list to cross-reference it with our business license list. And we identified, I think, 140 some businesses that were within 300 feet of that location.
Understood. It's one of the things we think we all know, but for these purposes, it should be defined, I believe.
Okay.
Then I want to say, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your leadership in coming forward with a reasonable proposal. I came in with some different ideas, but I'm willing to support your proposal. I think it's reasonable, and we can study it again, or the new council can study it again next year based upon real data.
Ms. Bryson?
First of all, I have a question for our town attorney, a procedural question. The ordinance has been adopted on first reading. but not yet, and we can't adopt it on second reading. So how can we adopt a resolution which is reflective upon the ordinance until there's a second reading? I don't see how that's procedurally possible.
Well, I don't think anything prevents council from considering the resolution at this time. Obviously, it doesn't have any real meaning until there's an ordinance that brings the whole program into play. You know, again, I don't think anything prevents you from doing that.
So we would be adopting a resolution without meaning then, is your opinion? I've got to ask why are we doing
Is
it?
that you can consider the resolution, but it won't have any real effect until you've adopted the ordinance.
Right. So Mayor, it seems as though we're putting the proverbial cart before the horse here. I don't see how we can, I would not support adopting anything until we've had a second reading of the ordinance.
I would also point out that under the text of the resolution, its effective date is January 1, 2025.
I see that, but I maintain that I'm not even sure we have authority to do it until we've adopted an ordinance on second reading, notwithstanding the effective date.
Can we make that a condition of the resolution?
I would not.
That the ordinance be adopted before the resolution takes effect?
I would not do that.
The resolution will be voted, the second reading will take place after the second vote on the ordinance.
There's usually not a second reading of a resolution, but you're right.
I have a question.
And then I have other comments after we've resolved the procedural question.
Do we not currently have a ordinance on hand?
So we do have an ordinance, and you've had first reading this evening. A couple things I would point out. One, you do currently have paid parking in place for several locations that are already in the ordinance. But the main thing is, we understood that these would need to be kind of adopted hand in glove, or at least that was the intent of bringing them forward together. So both the resolution and the ordinance have an effective date of January 1st, 2025. So even though they may be adopted separately, the effective dates for both are in fact the same date, so that they do come together. And if the recommendation from this body is to impose collection of those fees seasonally, the effective date is actually March of 2025.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion, Mayor, on what we're trying to do here. But I'll make some comments. First of all, we have a draft of a resolution before us, and we've not particularly talked about the language of that resolution itself. Also, as I recall, we had substantial issues with the Caligny Beach parking lot this summer. I call it creative parking. That's being a bit diplomatic. There were folks parking all over the place. Our property was being abused and in some cases damaged. And so I'm very concerned about the property that the town owns. And I'm very concerned about the impact on the beaches in that area. I agree with Ms. Becker about the expenditures that the town has approved with regard to the Old Wild Wings property, $4 million for additional parking, and not to charge parking in this area. I can't go along with that. So I would move to amend the resolution, if we're going to consider resolution today, or the motion that is, to adopt in lieu thereof the resolution before us, with section 1 being adoption of section 1A, $3 per hour, and section 2 adopting 2A, $15 for all-day parking, flat rate of $20 per vehicle on Saturdays and Sundays. That's my motion, to amend the motion on the floor.
So your motion is to amend to $3 an hour and $15 all day.
Yes, and not to exclude what's been labeled as the Pope area, which is undefined. So there would be a charge for parking at the Caligny Beach area.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Now, there's a discussion on that.
I haven't had a chance to discuss it.
Go ahead.
I am prepared to accept the proposal put forth by the mayor as represented in the motion by Mr. Brown. But it leaves me very uncomfortable to do that. We have several reasons why we've gotten into this endeavor, and much of it has to do with an existing level of traffic and unavailable parking spaces today. And we are all aware of development that is already planned in Western Beaufort County, Jasper County. The likelihood of more people coming to the beach is very significant. We have today a situation during peak times, months, weekends, whatever, where beachgoers are taking customers' parking spaces. We have all been concerned about that for some time. What we are suggesting and discussing today does not improve that situation at all. If the choice is between including or not including the Pope Coligny area, if we exclude it, the situation currently, which is, I consider as bad, will get a little worse. If we have paid parking in the Pope Coligny area, it'll be worse by a little more. But it's still bad right now, today, and we aren't doing a single thing for customers. And that leaves me very concerned. The answer, or an answer to that, is that the parking lots that belong to the shopkeepers, the private parking lots, be included in this paid parking program. The result of that is that beachgoers who go into the private lots would end up having to pay. They're not doing that now. Customers of the store would be able to get, presumably, electronic vouchers. This is a system which is widely known by merchants and customers all over the country. It would not be a surprise. It would probably not upset too many people. And I think that that approach, with the private people taking a role in paid parking, it would be their program. They would have to assume administrative and financial responsibility for operations, but they'd also get all of the parking fees from beachgoers who shouldn't be parking there, but do. So it isn't clear to me that what kind of cost would be assumed in that situation. And I think that is to me, is the only reasonable solution that we have to deal with this and still protect the role of customers in our situation. And I can understand why many of us want to have a year's data. I think we need to give very serious consideration to pushing that proposal so that we protect customers as well as others.
Thank you. Mr. Ames?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make an observation that could be challenged. That the town has been working on this for almost a decade or more in one way or another. It comes up with a plan and the businesses shoot it down. I would suggest, Mayor, that you create a task force of business owners and town representatives, and you challenge that task force to come up with a joint resolution by May 1st of 2025 or sooner if possible. And that implementation of that resolution would be by January 1st, 2026. I don't anticipate what that would look like, but we've got to bring together the interests of the businesses with the town's legal minds and planning minds, so I believe that establishing that is a step that would take us in a direction. We're pushing this down the road without having a deadline, and I think we need to establish the deadline, and I think we need to establish something that says to the business community, you gotta own this too. You come to the table, we'll come to the table, and we've got to have something done by a deadline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just another question. Just want to get clarity on the financials, after some of the questions that have been asked you, Mr. Gruber. I thought the number with the inclusion of the Pope District was 1.5. Am I wrong on that?
Yes.
So you're saying it'd be maybe $500,000 below that?
About 400,000 is what we projected based upon the number of spaces and then again, the occupancy rate of those spaces.
Right, and I know we're not storing the license plate data for an extensive period of time, but I'm curious to know if there's a way for us to get reporting as to the states that are using the facilities.
Yes, sir. That is one of the pieces of information that I do believe they're collecting. And I will say, we have some volume data in terms of days of the week at, I believe, Coligny is primarily where we've been collecting that data. What we don't have is the time that's spent by any individual vehicle within that lot because they're not registering or paying. So as we put in place that system, your question about the observed data and how long they're there, we'll be able to gather that once we know, yes, I paid for 2 hours, I paid for 6 hours, and we'll be then able to aggregate that and say, here's the number of vehicles, here's how long they're staying, and here's the percentage of various states that they're coming from. Again, going back to observed data, at least in the Coligny Beach lot this year, significant numbers of Georgia license plates are what we were observing.
Thank you.
So I just want to reiterate, one thing, and that's the municipal court side of this. Trash on the beaches, bottles on the beaches, fireworks on the beaches. There's no enforcement. We can't enforce anything around here. If this allows us to enforce parking on the island and gives us a court here in this hall to address those citations, then we're controlling ourselves, right? This is an avenue to get back into some form of enforcement to our community, which we don't have. So I look at it as though, are there issues? Absolutely. Is it controversial? Yes, it is. There are a lot of difference of opinions. Who knows what's right or wrong? And that's why I say let's start slow. But if this program, and Josh, I think it was just under $1.2 million that taking the Pope Avenue area out, the Wild Wings.
Correct.
Or I'm sorry, Coligny, taking that out, it takes us to $1.2 million with a fee of $635,000. It still leaves over $600,000 to incorporate a municipal court, plus have funds to go other places. We're fortunate that we don't need the funds from a higher paid parking program. We don't need that. That's not the purpose of this. It's not to create additional revenue streams. It's to protect ourselves. That's how I see it. It takes a compromised approach, in my opinion, and it gives us the time to get the data so that we can move forward at that appropriate time.
Mayor, can I follow up on your comments, please? Yes. It's actually a combination of your comments as well as Councilman Alford's comments. He correctly pointed out the development that is coming from the other side of the bridge. And he pointed out also the difficulties that, as you have as well, I think all of us acknowledge that we are having on our beaches with our parking, et cetera. And now, by virtue of the fact that we bought these 2 additional parking lots, many spaces additional, what we're saying, and not charging there, is what we've done is said, come on in. We've got even more space for you when we know and we've just acknowledged that we have a problem. That to me sounds completely counter to what we should be doing if we're trying to solve a problem. And I'm trying to solve a problem. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could speak to the proposed amendment to the motion on the floor.
Yes.
I'm concerned about the impact in that Pope Avenue area, the whole area, North and South Forest Beach. If we provide free parking in that area, it's going to drive even more vehicles to that area. You don't have to have data for this. Maybe it's anecdotal, somebody can argue that. But there have been many times that you can't move on Pope Avenue. There's not enough infrastructure there for the number of vehicles that will be coming down there in the future. And if we're going to keep folks coming by adding more parking availability that is free in that area, I don't know how you're going to move. Sea Pine Circle was stopped. You couldn't move through there. Pope Avenue, I used to live down there a block from this area. I would only walk on Saturdays because you can't get in and out. You think about, we do have at least a shipyard fire station close by, but how are they going to move their vehicles back and forth on Pope Avenue? So we've got to do something to be able to manage the traffic there. And providing more and more free parking is not going to do it. It's just going to exacerbate the problem. And I'm very, very concerned about damages to our property. And that's above the cost. Mayor, you were talking about a difference of about $600 million. Well, sorry, 600,000, yeah. Well, what's a nickel here, there? But anyhow, you're talking about that difference, but then, you look at the kind of enforcement and the kind of other activities, cleanup, et cetera, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow, and we've got to put a stop at it. I said yesterday, we have lost control, and only by having more controls like this, I would love for there to have been to some resolution with the business community as opposed to don't charge. But we've worked at it for a while and none has come forward. And so I continue to say we've got to have a way of managing this parking facility that we have on Pope Avenue, and the Cligney Beach parking area as well as the other new parking areas. And it's not charging nothing. So I stand by my motion, and I think that we ought to move forward with it that way.
Thank
But
you.
we
Mayor,
don't not
call a
act on it
question on the
today.
amendment.
Mr. Ames, real quick.
Yeah, I think it's inescapable that we don't have an answer to the enforcement question, and we don't have an answer to the employee parking question. I think we establish a deadline when those things have to be dealt with from the town standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got a motion to amend the motion to $3 an hour, $15 all day, and not exclude any areas. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. And that motion fails. Then we have a motion from Mr. Brown, seconded by Mr. Ames. And I don't have that in front of me, but that which Mr. Brown stated. Are you good? I got it. Pardon? Yes. I'm sorry, Kim. Okay, afterwards. Okay. So there's a motion by Mr. Brown, second by Mr. Ames, and all those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand.
Mayor, I'm sorry, we haven't had full discussion on that one. One more thing I would suggest is that it's been asked that the town collect more data. I think it would be important for us to also ask businesses for data on problems with their parking and not anecdotal.
And I'm just going to ask that someone recall the motion because I don't recall what Alex, in respect, what your motion was. So,
Absolutely. I will restate. I move that we approve a resolution setting forth the following elements for a paid beach parking program. Resident beach parking passes will be free and will remain limited to 2 per household. The town will charge a rate of $3 per hour at all beach parking facilities with the ability to provide a maximum daily rate option of $15 per day, Monday through Friday, and impose a flat rate of $20 per day per vehicle on Saturdays and Sundays. The town will collect beach parking fees seasonally from March 1st until September 7th, The operating hours for all town beach parks will be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. year-round. The town will collect beach parking fees 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. Chaplain Beach Park will remain exempt from the beach parking fees during all youth recreational sports seasons. Beach parking areas within the Pope Avenue Business District will remain free of charge, but are subject to be reviewed and revised at a later date.
Okay. For semantics, we will call the vote on that again. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-2. All right, next, thank you all. Next, we have Sean Colon, who present the conditions of a resolution to accept the final report for the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Project Independent Study from October of 2023 through June 2024. There were 10 public meetings with the committee. In August 2024, the final draft report was presented to the advisory committee with a 2-2 vote to accept the final report with a committee member absent. Mr. Kohler.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor, Town Council. Sean Colon, Assistant Town Manager. And I'm here to present to you the final report completed by Lockmuller Group at the direction of Town Council. So Town Council desired to contract with a qualified firm to conduct an independent study of the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor and to have the select firm verify assumptions, methodologies, alternatives, and preferred design recommendations that were technically accurate and served in the best interest of Hilton Head Island. The initial findings from this report were presented to Town Council at a Town Council workshop on June 17th. Staff and Lockmuller presented those results, so I'm not going to go too far back in time. I'm going to focus on the additional findings to include impacts downstream of the defined project between Moss Creek and Gumtree Road, which was the initial assessment by Lockmuller. So before you is consideration of resolution to accept this final report. Accepting this final report would complete the Lockmuller work. It would also authorize the town staff to utilize this for future projects as they arise. So I'm going to give you an overview on the project progress. I'm going to review the downstream impacts that were included in task 4 of the scope of work approved by Town Council, mitigation solutions for a couple local intersections, and then ask for consideration to accept the final report and answer any questions. So since the Town Council workshop to talk about again the major what we call the gateway section, Moss Creek, and this was through to Gumtree. The steps that have been taken since that time have been continuing the downstream evaluation and analysis of intersections. And so on the business route, the intersections went all the way through to the Hooping Crane Indigo Run intersection, and on the Cross Island Parkway to and through the Sea Pine Circle. They've included some mitigation strategies where there were impacts for consideration, and again, the goal would be to incorporate those into future projects for those intersections. They prepared the traffic operations and safety report, the final report, which was in the packet, which comprehensively details all of the work done between October of last year and through August of this year. I wanted to note that the presentation of the final report and findings, recommendations were presented to the advisory committee on Wednesday, August 14th. At that meeting, there were 4 members. There was a request to recommend the final report to Town Council, and there was a vote of 2-2. So it's coming forward to Town Council without a recommendation from the committee. I do want to note that there was 1 member of the committee absent at the August meeting. So, general summary of the tasks that were included in the scope of work approved by Town Council. Project initiation and coordination, that was reviewing existing works that were done to date to validate existing assumptions, and then to move into the travel demand modeling evaluation. Lockmuller looked at the regional travel demand model that was provided by Low Country Council of Governments and ALATS, that was used by SCDOT and Beaufort County in initially identifying and setting parameters for the Gateway project. They completed a review, they built their own model, included different outputs as far as assumptions and growth rate, and completed task 2. They completed the traffic model update and calibrated for operational output to understand the predictability of the model and use that as they generated information on alternatives that were considered in the Gateway project area. They looked at modeling through that entire area, evaluated 5 alternatives, 4 recommended by the consultant, along with the Southern Connector, which was recommended by some committee members and members of the public. That was all evaluated, along with a recommendation to advance 1 alternative for additional consideration. That alternative was consistent with the project that council identified and set expectations for during its meeting on June 28th. That defined project from town council was used to look at the downstream impacts as this next part of the evaluation. The task 5 is to prepare and provide the final report to town council. That's what we're here today for, to share the final report with town council and present you any findings and answer any questions. So beyond what was discussed in June, and really from October through June, additional work was done beyond the Gumtree intersection on the business route and down the Cross Island Parkway to include Sea Pine Circle. That information was not presented to the town council at the June meeting. We reviewed the findings that were included in the alternative that was presented and authorized by town council to include 1 left turn lane at Squire Pope Road, going eastbound and headed north, and then 1 right turn lane coming off of Squire Pope Road and going westbound. That was the alternative that was included in that modeling. So with that, they included analysis, including their modeling capabilities to determine the impacts downstream. As you can see, this is the defined project area that was included in the scope of work. And as I mentioned, on the business route to Indigo Run and to Sea Pine Circle on the Cross Island route. The consultant built the modeling using Synchro and then switched to a more accurate and better predictability model called VisSim. What they presented to the committee and what I'm sharing with you here today is travel time differences between Moss Creek, the westernmost portion of the project, and the easternmost portion, most point on the business route at Indigo Run, and easternmost point on the Cross Island at Sea Pine Circle. You can see what's included in here. There's the travel time simulation. This information is consistent with what was presented in June. A no-build scenario for travel time in the eastbound direction of roughly 26 minutes. With a no-build. Reduces down to 10 minutes with the project defined by town council and supported in June. And then westbound, you can see that same travel time going off island went from 25 minutes to 10 minutes. Again, this information was shared with town council. That's for the business route. I just want to point out for the Sea Pines section, you can see the difference in timeframes there, and then off island 41 to 15. So overall, the evaluation of implementing the project in the Gateway Corridor, the modeling found no significant improvements east of Gumtree or the Cross Island, with a couple of exceptions when you compare it to the no-build scenario. There were some additional improvements for consideration at the Wilborn and Pembroke Drive intersections of William Milton Parkway on the business route. And then also the Seapine Circle as you go on the Cross Island route through Seapine Circle. What you'll see in the results are the most significant impacts and improvement would be in the Seapine Circle. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir when we talk about there's some deficiencies at Seapines and the moving traffic through the Stony corridor a little faster only gets traffic there a little quicker and therefore creates a little more congestion there. And they've recommended they provided 2 options for solutions at Seapines, and I'm just going to touch on those briefly. I do want to remind Town Council that we have another engagement, the corridors planning, thoroughfares corridor planning, that also includes a deep dive and evaluation of the Palmetto Bay, Seapine Circle, Pope Avenue section, and includes very similar recommendations for Seapine Circle. So they provided two options for these impacted signals or intersections that I'll run through briefly. So the recommendations.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yes, ma'am.
Is there some way to conclude this? We've heard this before. I appreciate the
If
data.
council is okay with
sure.
what we've heard so far, then we can conclude and move on to public comment and then.
Sure.
Even though we're already given municipal consent.
Okay. So Kim, has anybody signed up for public comment on this item?
I have Christopher Cliff.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Cliff?
We signed up, Lynn Greeley and I signed up first.
This is for this item, sir.
Oh, for this agenda,
Yes.
I'm very sorry. I did not hear that, sorry.
Mr. Cliff.
Let me state at the outset that I don't support the SODOT's proposed solution, and I also believe the council erred terribly in granting an unconditional municipal consent. Having said that, it doesn't prevent me from complimenting Sean and his team. I think he's done a great job in the face of a considerable amount of criticism, including from me and other people. I think they've done a great job. Lockmuller, some of their presentations were unintelligible. In my bailiwick, I spend a lot of time in strategy, a lot of time in statistical analysis and interpretation and planning. And Lockmuller, for the life of me, I can't understand how they reached some of their conclusions. They used 2 different systems and they've proposed one because it gives a better answer. They've been singularly unable to reconcile the difference between the answers from their 2 systems. I've looked at it, I've read it, I've looked at it again, and I still can't reconcile the 2 differences. They use the same input data, they use the same time period, and yet you get 2 completely different answers, and their explanation is a glib one. It's very glib. It says one is more accurate than the other. That's tosh. What they're actually presenting is the solution that supports the SCDOT preferred solution. So what does accept the final report mean? I'm not really sure. I think we can all accept that Lockmuller completed all the tasks they were asked to undertake, and therefore I think it'd be appropriate for the council to record that they've submitted a final report. But if accept means you approve of it, I would ask you to reconsider, because it's full of flaws and the underlying principles they've used are subject to ridicule. But none of that should take away from Sean and his team. What a great job they did. So I'd record the report. I would drop the word accept. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cliff.
I also have Mr. Advocat on here.
Town Council, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Town Manager. Here I am again, after spending so many hours on this corridor issue. And I want to open your eyes I think the wool has been pulled over our eyes in many ways, and critical elements have been muffled. And so I have 13 issues here that I'll present to you, and I hope you take it in because it's important for the future of our island. So the Corridor Committee, number one, did not approve the Lochmuller study for a whole bunch of reasons. The solutions suggested by committee members have been flatly ignored. An 11-lane bridge is not providing a remedy to the traffic congestion. Okay, so you build it, it's not guaranteed that it will provide us with a solution. It may turn into a parking lot in itself. The adaptive traffic management system, which I was very happy to see installed, is not adaptive. It doesn't create the adaptive nature, creating a read on density of traffic and a continuous green flow. It doesn't. And I hope that the town is going to take some action on that. A 2-lane merge from the Cross Island Parkway into the westbound 278 was thrown out. And that was also something that would ease the traffic flow. It was thrown out for no good reason. Widening the bridges with 1 lane rather than rebuilding 3 of the 4 spans has also been pushed aside. And it is a good thing to look at and at the cost aspects of it. A bypass with direct connection to the Cross Island and circumventing traffic lights was also pushed aside by designs suggested by a landscaping company. We seriously looked at it. We looked at it because it's a viable solution. Now, my most important thing is the modeling on the traffic simulations needs to be done with a top-down model, so you can actually see what the effects are on various parts of the island. If you use a top-down model, you can see the effects. If you put a bridge in here, if you put an overpass there, you cannot see that in the models presented on the VISIM and Synchro. You simply can't. It's a very simple way to approach it. Every meeting of the Corridor Committee, I have suggested a consultant do this. It's been ignored. And I think it provides a solution, not just for the town, but for people to understand. It's quite simple. So I would like to have the consultant come back and actually do that.
Mr. Habakkuk, your time is up.
Okay, well, these are all the questions I have. I hope that you can answer these things in an open way.
Thank you. Kim, is there any other comments? Okay. Do we have a motion? No. We've got to sign up. Do we have a consideration of a resolution to accept the final report for the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Project Independent Study?
I'll be happy to make a motion that council approve a resolution to accept the final report for the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Project Independent Study.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none?
No,
Oh,
yes, sir.
sorry.
I raised my hand.
Sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity. First, I'm going to request that the questions that our resident had, that he ran out of time to ask, be given to the town clerk, so that all of us may see those comments and that they be put into the record as well. In addition to that, I have a question. So what was the cost of our study?
The contract cost was $429,000.
And did that include the additional work from Gumtree to Sea Pines?
It did, yes, ma'am.
So that was inclusive of all the work that was done?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And who paid the $429? Where did those funds come from?
We received a grant earmarked from the state of South Carolina for $300,000. The balance, the other money, $129, was built within the town budget. I believe we're going to come in under budget and not reach that $429. But I don't have the final invoice. So, but the balance beyond $300 was within the town council approved budget.
Okay, so when that final budget, final cost comes in, I'd like to request that or given that
I'll
final
provide that to
cost.
the town manager, and he, we can convey that final cost to the town council.
Okay. You know, I don't disagree with the comments that were made here today. I listened since the beginning, well before I was a town council member, when the first discussions about 278 and the corridor and the bridges started. And I listened carefully to every meeting. I may have missed in all that time. I may have missed 3 or 4. The conclusions that were drawn and acted upon by the town council are ones that I think in the long run are going to prove to be bad decisions. And I'm not looking forward to that day, because then we'll all be sitting here looking for solutions to the problems that we ourselves created. That's a shame. I'm also interested in these next steps that seem to have been put into place, from the corridor project now to the second stage of the plan to the Sea Pine Circle. We all know that traffic on the island is bad. We've made some suggestions on how it can be improved, some steps that can be taken, ones that were even suggested tonight. And yet here we are, putting ourselves in more jeopardy of more capacity issues as we move forward. And I wish it wasn't that way. And I hope to help to solve the problems that come before us in the future. I will not be accepting this report. The statements made today and my experience over the last many years of watching this lead me to a conclusion that the report was flawed and that the decisions were incorrect. And I've said the rest. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Bryson?
I will also vote against accepting this report for the reasons that I set forth in my comments at our workshop on June 17th, so I'm not going to repeat those. I do not believe that Lockmuir completed the task, notwithstanding the analysis of 100%, particularly with regard to the Stony neighborhood. There was a task included in there for a community meeting town hall. If required, there was no discussion. It was not brought up to the committee. And the response from the representative Lockmuir at that workshop was, this is it. This workshop is it. I've found that insulting to the Stony community. And since the committee did not recommend acceptance, voted 2-2, it came without any recommendation. In fact, the motion to accept it failed. So I will not be voting in favor of accepting this report.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm understanding that we're gonna have conversations at our workshop around the corridor. I'm curious to know if the Terminal Bay and Sea Pines intersection will be a part of that discussion. Is that the plan?
Yes, sir, that is one item on the agenda, is that section of the corridors, Palmetto Bay, Sea Pines, Pope Avenue, and North and South Forest Beach.
Okay, Councilman Alfred has continued to beat on the drum of the Sea Pines Circle needing some attention. And I understand that there's, this option A in front of us here that you have on the screen. I also know that we have had numerous conversations with Sea Pines about some alternative routes into Sea Pines to sort of alleviate some of the traffic. And I know that that's going to take some time, but I would encourage us as we're moving forward to not limit ourselves as far as those conversations are concerned. I think that is a bigger, heavier conversation that needs to happen, just as we have put as much time and energy into the corridor as we come across the bridges, we need to put just as much energy, time, and investment into this area as well, because we understood from the very beginning that there's a problem here today, and the problem will be worse in the future. It's a pinch point. It's something that we need to set forth as a priority, in my opinion. So just want to make that point, and not lose sight of the fact that there's a problem today, regardless of the report, regardless of the controversy. This is an issue.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Any other comments? All right, seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Ames, seconded by Mr. Stanford, to accept the final report of the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Project Independent Study. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Passes 5-2. Lastly, we have Mr. Cullen presenting us with a resolution to dissolve the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Independent Review Advisory Committee. So I guess we could just ask, is there a motion?
I'd be happy to make a motion that council approve a resolution to dissolve the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Independent Review Advisory Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any public comment on this, Kim? Anybody sign up?
I have Christopher Cliff again.
Okay.
My name's Christopher Cliff, not Christopher Cliff again. Anyway, this committee should have been dissolved a long time ago. I'm sure, Alan, you felt it was going nowhere. I felt it was going nowhere. And quite candidly, despite the individuals being very pleasant and very professional, Lockmuller were incompetent. Their statistical presentations, the oral presentations, and the visual presentations were pretty poor. And you candidly were unintelligible, which Sean will tell you. I commented him numerous times. And I found it very, very difficult to follow their logic, and their presentations, I guess, were largely directed towards providing what the Greater Island Council wanted the outcome to be. And so this resolution to dissolve the advisory committee is long overdue, and I strongly recommend that you all pass it 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else signed up?
That's all.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion from council? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Mayor, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Quick enough on my green button. For the reasons I set forth with regard to the previous one, 8C, I will be voting against the dissolution of this committee. I don't think the tasks have been completed, so the work has not been completed. And also, we don't yet have a response from Beaufort County with regard to our memorandum of understanding. So I will not be voting in favor of dissolving the committee.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Ames, second by Mr. Sanford to dissolve the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Independent Review Advisory Committee. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Those opposed? Passes 6-1. Public comment. Moving on to the non-agenda item section of public comment. Section 2-5-70 of the town's code limits each person to 1 3-minute comment when addressing council. At the end of your 3 minutes, you are asked to conclude your comments. Please maintain a decorum suitable for the meeting and refrain from using any profane, abusive, or obscene language. If you have any materials you would like to give to town council, please give them to the town clerk after you are finished speaking. Kim, do we have anybody signed up to speak today?
Yes, Skip Hoagland.
Can I ask if, before the clock starts, are there any people after me or Lynn Greeley? Are we the only two? There are people after us?
No, sir.
We're the only two?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, because I was gonna pass and go last, but that's okay. Okay, finally, after 35 years, the IRS 501-C6 tax codes in UBIT and its regulatory language makes it illegal to tax fund a nonprofit chamber to be a hired DMO under the current South Carolina 8 tax codes that has been fully confirmed to be illegally drafted. Also note, IRS C6 federal law prevails over South Carolina 8 tax code regulatory language. South Carolina tax code has to fully comply to the IRS C6 tax code and must say for profits only and can bid and can be an ad agency, a local media, a newspaper, a tourist magazine, and must be an open fair bid under procurement law. The DMO is not about an illegal chamber making long Condé Nast Traveler magazine and statistical presentations. It's purely down to the 501-C6 law that makes it illegal to hire a nonprofit chamber to be a DMO versus a for-profit ad agency, newspaper, or media. The hired state DMO ad agency and an AG legal opinion can confirm this. Also, a tax code says no advertising sales or private profits. 30% of the balance must be allocated to a special fund and used for advertising and promotion of tourism only to develop and increase tourism attendance through the generation of publicity. To manage and direct expenditure of tourism promotion funds, the municipality and the county should select one or two DMOs. The for-profits bidding must have an existing ongoing tourist promotion program or the ability to develop such. If no local or state for-profit exists or bids, the municipality or county shall run the DMO in-house and just use existing employees, hire a marketing employee, or hire an outside ad agency under a procurement bid to operate the DMO in-house. All other language in the A-Tax code, like full tax accounting transparency, would remain the same. Also, the DMO must provide proven performance metrics. The viability and need for an old DMO business model have been drastically reduced, as most tourism today is produced for free by technology, local search, and social media. We still need a DMO, but very small and easy to operate today, and AI will even make it easier and better. I will fully explain EI presentations later. Also, the Chamber's illegal contract, $40 million value contract, must be canceled now, not next year. Why did you send out the taxpayer, the private chamber survey? The Chamber's not a government. Also, I would like to announce that I'm going to donate. I bought HiltonHitIsland.ai, HiltonHitIsland.ai, and I will donate these websites to the new DMO for Hilton Head Island.
Your time is
a
up,
legal
sir.
DMO. Bless you, remember the
Mr.
Chamber.
Hoagland,
Thank you.
your time is up.
I'll put this hat on.
Lynn Greeley.
Let me know if you want one. I'll get you one.
Hi, Lynn Greeley, Moss Creek. I wanted to.
Lynn, do you want me to make this speech for you?
I was just going to say, I want you.
Okay.
I want to give you my 3 minutes.
Do you mind if I make the speech for her?
No, sir, that is not allowed.
I'm sorry,
No, sir.
the judge.
That is not
You know,
allowed.
we're going to court. You know, we're in the court on this.
Mr. Hoagland?
She has a right to offer a POA. It's
This
legal.
is not allowed. This is not allowed.
No, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to make the speech for
Can
her.
I have a
because it
motion
is-
to go to executive session, please?
No, then go ahead, then read it. We're going to deal with this next time. If you're going to do that, you're not going to allow, we're going to deal with you next time. And we're going to see you in court. You have a lot of nerve, Mr. Perry.
Mr. Hoagland?
You have a lot of nerve.
Okay, let me finish. Okay. Again, the city council is hiring a DMO, has 2 legal choices under state and federal laws. Hire a state, local for-profit media or ad agency, or operate the DMO in-house with 1 part-time marketing employee. Again, under the IRS 501c6, no profit tax laws and codes, nonprofit chambers, CVBs are forbidden to even bid or to be hired to run a DMO or profit from doing so. The C6 tax code says it's illegal for any nonprofit to be in any business whatsoever that is normally carried on by for-profits. A chamber business league is an association of persons having some common business interest, the purpose of which is to promote such common interests and not to engage in a regular business of any kind ordinarily carried on by for-profits, or unfairly competes against its own chamber members or for-profits in the local business community. No part of the chamber's net earnings may be earned to the benefit of any private shareholder, employee, or individual, and it may not be organized nor operated in any form of fashion as for-profit, disguised as a nonprofit, to engage in an activity ordinarily carried on for-profit, even if the business is operated on a cooperative basis or produces only enough income to be self-sustaining. If a nonprofit chamber produces any large amounts of profits from IRS UBIT, unrelated business income, and fails to pay taxes, it must not only pay the taxes owed like a for-profit, but would be considered tax evasion like any for-profit and stand to lose its nonprofit tax status. Also, if the chamber was illegally tax-funded and used taxpayers' money to generate these illegal profits from advertising sales, sponsorship, merchandise, etc., all the illegally used tax funds would need to be paid back to the taxpayer and government entity that knowingly, illegally funded the nonprofit chamber would be held liable as taxpayers' proxy.
Thank you, Mrs. Greeley. Your time is up.
You cannot
Thank
be
you.
any more corrupt, putting the public comment last.
So,
You're
Mr.
disrespecting
Lemon,
all.
we have
You make us sit here for hours.
Mr. Hoagland?
For hours.
Please, sit down.
You work for all of us in
Mr.
here. We
Hoagland?
should be the
He's
first
disrupting
public
the
comment.
Hoagland. Please
Why have
sit
you
down.
put public comment last?
Mr. Hoagland.
It is outrageous.
Mr. Orlando.
You
do
need
we
to
have
be
a need to go into
removed. You
executive
absolutely
session?
need
Yes,
to be
sir.
removed from office.
As shown on our agenda, item 10A, executive session items.
Do you have a motion?
Yes, I move that council go into executive session for the reasons cited by the town manager.
Mr. Hoagland. We have a first and a second. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. So moved, 7-0.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. So moved, 7-0.
Mayor, I have a motion to make coming out of executive session. I move that the town council authorize the mayor and the town manager be authorized to execute and deliver the proposed contract by and between the town of Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and Edith Moultrie for the purchase and sale of 1.89 acres, more or less, on Beach City Road, and to take such other and further actions as may be necessary to complete the transaction described in the agreement.
Second?
Second.
So I've got a second with Mr. Alfred. Any discussion from the audience? Not any discussion from council? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. 7-0. Mr. Ames, do we have any other action coming out of executive
No, we do
session?
not. I move that we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. We are adjourned. Thank you. Have a great day. See you at Hilton Head Island.